This is the Asset Protection Show. Expert strategies by attorney John Skabelund.
Welcome to the show dedicated to not only protecting your assets from lawsuits and creditors, but also protecting your legacy. After all, what we do isn't just for ourselves, but to create generational wealth. Peter McKenzie is our guest today. Peter operates several property management companies in California and also an owner in Idaho of a property management company there. He's been doing property management for over 10 years and investing for over 20. Peter, approximately how many properties do you or your companies manage?
If I add them up, it's well over 600 properties that we manage. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's great. So listeners, whether you're a real estate investor or considering investing in real estate, today you're going to discover how to maximize your real estate profits while also protecting your investment properties from lawsuits. So Peter, let's start with the background. And that is, for my clients, far and away, real estate investing is the most popular investment they make. However, it's also frequently the greatest source of lawsuits and headaches for my clients. I'm hoping today that you can share what you've learned over the years. So with that, what are some of the most common mistakes you see real estate investors make when it comes to real estate?
So by and large, the number one thing that people do wrong when it comes to real estate investing, and we have a podcast that we've done a bunch of episodes and had a bunch of experts come on, is not treating it like a business. So it doesn't matter if you have one rental property or 100 rental properties, you are operating a business and you need to act as if you're operating a business. It's not a hobby. It's not something you do on the side. I mean, it can be something you do on the side, but you need to treat it like a real business because the IRS doesn't care. The judge doesn't care. Nobody cares that you're I just have one property and I'm not some big conglomerate, with venture capital and, all these big bad things. You are the same as those companies that are doing the same things. You have the same exposure, the same risk. And that concept bleeds over into all of the problems that we see from our perspective in property management boils down to that. The people who take it seriously, who treat it like a business are the ones who succeed, the ones who can sleep well at night. It's the people that are just Hail Marying it, winging it, just not even doing their research, not understanding what risks they're even up against are the ones that I see get burned. And there's a lot of ways to get burned in the real estate investment world.
No, that's a great point. And I see the same thing. People often want to dabble in real estate investing without taking it seriously. So what are some of the things you see that you can tell they're not taking this seriously? They're not treating it as a business.
Anybody who gets involved emotionally with the properties or the tenants or the issues that surround it, that's to me the number one sign that this person needs to make some changes if they're going to have any longevity in this asset class. If people that take it personally when a tenant does something, or if the tenant damages, they put a hole in Johnny's room that we raised Johnny in, and I'm so upset and I'm going to go have a conversation with them or things like that. Those are big problems. I often tell our clients, like, you need to look at this rental property no different than you look at a 401 or, a mutual fund in your 401k. It's the same thing. It's designed to produce a return. There's a lot of benefits to real estate investing, far superior to other investment classes. But, you have to do the things that you need to do and not being emotionally connected to it, not, making sure that you have the proper insurance in place at a minimum. Obviously you're from the asset protection world. There's a whole can of worms when it comes to how deep and how many layers you want to put in place when it comes to asset protection. But there's plenty of people who do none of that stuff. In fact, you'd be shocked. We deal with people who get leases off the internet, which are terrible, which are non-compliant, which open you up for all kinds of lawsuits and crazy stuff. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Yeah, but let's tackle each one of those. So let's talk about some business formalities that, in your opinion, every real estate investor should have. So let's start with just how you hold title. What's your opinion there? And obviously, full disclosure, clients, Peter and I have known each other for a long time. Peter knows what I do as an asset protection attorney. But from your perspective as a property manager, I'm sure you have clients or have seen clients own it in their own name or in their living trust. what's wrong with that? What issues do you see from the business formation stand?
Yeah, so in the real estate investing community, there's a debate on whether you should put your property in an LLC or just rely on insurance, right? And there's pros and cons to both. I think most people, well, I don't even know. I don't know what the statistics are. You may know more than I do in that regard, but a lot of people just put insurance in place and they go, you know what? I have an insurance policy that's going to mitigate some of my risk. I don't want to hassle with an LLC or some of these other entities. That's how I'm going to do it. And frankly, if everything goes right, that's probably fine. But the reality is nothing ever goes right. And if, everybody has had an experience with an insurance company before. I mean, frankly, I'm not the biggest fan of insurance companies, and they are in the business of not paying claims. If they just paid every claim they were ever submitted, they'd probably be out of business very quickly. So the problem with the strategy of I'm just going to put insurance in place is, if you've ever read an insurance policy, and I was just looking at insurance property or policy for a property we're in escrow on, the exclusion list just keeps getting longer and longer and longer. But in the end, you're like covered for one or two things. The chances of your claim falling in that one or two things aren't very high. So the problem I see with using insurance as a tool, or as the only tool to protect yourself, is they'll deny your claim. And now you're in a fight with your insurance company. So you need another layer. It's a bad idea to own it in your personal name. The reason being, especially where we're at, the majority of our work is in California. It's a very litigious state. There are more than I can count pro-tenant, pro bono law firms out there that are just looking to sue landlords and push a political agenda, which has nothing to do with wrong or right, who will do these things for your tenants for free, which will make your life as a landlord extremely difficult. For all those reasons, you should put the property in an entity that provides some coverage from you as a person. It's a little more of a hassle. It's more expensive. There is, a compliance piece to it. But if you want to sleep well at night, which I do, I don't want to worry about some frivolous lawsuit that wipes me and my family out completely and devastates us financially, which is the worst case scenario, right? Like I often tell our clients, because every real estate investor's fear is like, they're going to damage my property. And my comeback is, your property can be replaced. Frankly, sometimes if the property burns down to the ground, that's a blessing in disguise, assuming, nobody gets hurt. You're going to get a new property that's brand new, and you're going to have more equity in it after that's all done. The biggest risk to you is that you break some law you don't know you're breaking, and your tenant sues you and you bankrupt your family. That's the biggest risk. And that's not the number one thing on most real estate investors' minds.
No, that's great. No, that's an excellent point. Because from an asset protection standpoint, Peter, as you know, I'm always worried about, hey, what if there's an injury on the property? Who are they suing? And so, as you said, I see time and time again two problems with insurance, if that's your only tool, is not only denial of claims, but what if the coverage is not sufficient? So I'm sure we'll talk about some of the horror stories you've seen, but sadly, there was a fire that burned the property to the ground. Smoke alarms didn't go off, and father and three kids died. Now, they sue the owner of the property. That client is totally exposed to all the liability. And so that is a concern for some clients is, hey, why do I want to invest in real estate when it exposes me to all these lawsuits and claims? And to your excellent point there, if I do this wrong, I could actually be exposing myself to liability as a landlord, right?
I have a smoke detector story. It happened to one of our clients in another state, which thankfully we weren't managing this property, but they have, a lot of people have investments in multiple states.
Right.
It was an apartment complex in Nevada, I believe. There was a fire, somebody died, and the insurance was denying the claim.
Mm.
A big deal, right? Luckily, they had the property in an LLC, so they were, that was another layer that was good. But in the end, whether or not they were going to be out of pocket for all the costs related to it or not, meaning whether the insurance was going to pick up the claim and cover it or not, boiled down to one thing. And it was, can you prove that there was a smoke detector in that unit? And this is definitely a hashtag check mark in the corner of hiring a property management company, because the documentation that management companies do is, for the most part, much better than the documentation that a self-managing landlord does.
Right.
The way they got out of that one was they had an inspection by the management company. They verified that a smoke detector was there, and that was their I shouldn't say get out of jail free card, but that's what allowed the claim to be paid. Otherwise, they were going to be, whether or not the lawsuit that was coming was going to, whether or not their entity was going to stand up or not, they were going to be out all that money for unit burning up, whatever that family's going to sue over. But luckily, they had a management company in place. They were able to prove that the smoke detector was there, and it ended up, a lot better than it could have, even though it was a tragic situation and people died. But good point. Like that's why you gotta treat it as a business. Because the reality is, this statistic I'm pretty comfortable with. They say roughly 65 to 70% of properties are managed by the people who own them, meaning the majority of people in the United States do not have a property management company, which, when it comes to the world of asset protection and being able to prove and document all these things when the worst case scenario happens, that's a pretty heavy burden for mom and pop landlord to live up to. Like, we talk to mom and pop landlords on a regular basis. They are not superstars when it comes to documentation and bookkeeping and keeping all of their stuff together, which is what one thing you need when it gets bad. So
let's jump into that. As you know, you're singing the gospel of asset protection. You've heard me singing for a long time. And as you know, asset protection is a team sport. One of those, of course, is a good tax professional to look at it from a tax perspective. But I'm a big believer not only in a good insurance agent, but a good property manager. And you touched on one of the common problems I see my clients make is that they often are not good at bookkeeping. So I love the fact that property managers are actually really keeping track of the books for my clients. And what do I mean by that? As you know, Peter, I need my clients to be able to run a profit and loss statement for each property they own to make sure that it's its own business. That if we're hauled into court, even if we have a holding company that owns LLCs underneath it, and there might be only one bank account, that's okay from my perspective, so long as we can delineate we have financially been keeping track of all income, all expenses by property. That's where I think you guys excel. But why don't you share why else should a real estate investor hire a property manager?
So that's one of the reasons, for sure, the bookkeeping side of it. In our state, California, which is one of the most regulated landlord-tenant states in the union, it's a virtual full-time job to stay on top of the amount of laws that the state puts out. And we do webinars on this. We try to keep our clients abreast of all the changes, but it's literally, I'm not even exaggerating, there's probably 20 to 30 new laws every single year that they're cranking out just that affect landlords, right? So if you don't have some weird affection for staying on top of legislative releases from the state, you probably shouldn't be managing your property, because literally, if you haven't looked at your lease in the last 2 years, it's not compliant with the new laws, which guess what? The laws have teeth behind them. They need to be followed, or you're putting yourself at risk. So I would say, if you're going to manage your property on your own, you better love keeping on top of all the legislative changes. And guess what? It's not only the state, it's the county, it's the city. There's multiple agencies that affect this business, and it's a nightmare to try to stay on top of it. So that's where a good management company, and there's plenty of bad ones, but a good management company can provide an extreme amount of leverage to you in that respect. The other thing is, there's two areas that or one area that is one of the most litigated areas in landlord tenant law, and it's how you pick the person that's going to live in your property. And you would think that this is relatively easy, but it's not, because there's federal protected classes, there's state protected classes, and for the most part, somebody belongs to one of them. There's very few people that don't belong to any of them. If you make a decision on who's going to live in your property, whether you factored in a protected class or not is almost irrelevant. What matters is, did the person think that you maybe made a decision based on a protected class? And the burden of proof is on you to prove that you didn't, because you're not going to, I mean, I suppose you could end up in a court of law, but most of this is, there's the Fair Housing Department, and they're the ones that are figuring this out. And they easily let, I think the minimum fine's like $25,000 or whatever. So they're the ones that are going to go, okay, so-and-so says you discriminated against them. Prove to us how you didn't. And if you don't have that type of documentation, those types of policies, which I'm here to tell you, mom and pop landlords just don't. They don't have the capacity or the time. Then that's a big risk for managing on your own. The management company, the good ones, that's easy. Yeah, here's our screening policy. Here's how we approve applications. Here's this, here's that. It's all documented because it's an actual business, which is why I go back to my original point. You have to run this like a business. If you don't, you're just asking for problems. So.
Well, that's a great point. So, how do you distinguish between property managers? Help us, give us the inside scoop. If I'm interviewing property managers, how can I tell? Because they all sound great and they're full of promises, but how do we distinguish?
Yeah. So I mean, I consider myself a little bit of an expert in this, because before I opened a property management company, I don't want to say just a real estate investor, but I was a real estate investor investing in properties out of state. So I had multiple management companies, and I had gone through multiple management companies, meaning hired and fired people who weren't doing what they were supposed to. So how to pick a good one? I mean, we could do a whole podcast on that alone, but the most important parts are, you need to interview them. You need to talk to them. They need to have intelligent answers to common questions. You need to look at their reputation. And the way you do that is you look online, Yelp, Google reviews, ask for references, but they need to understand the metrics, the KPIs of running your rental property. And they are there. It goes back to running it like a business. Like, if they don't have, like, if they can't spit this stuff off the tip of their tongue and make you feel really comfortable that they understand what your goals are, what you're trying to do, and the metrics behind that, you need to go the other way. The other thing, the number one complaint people have about management companies is their communication is poor. So I always tell people, when you're looking, like, the easiest litmus test you can do is call, and then time how long it takes for them to get back to you. Not maybe for a secretary to answer the phone, but for someone to actually get back to you and answer your questions, because that is the most responsive that company's ever going to be. You're literally calling them on the phone and saying, hey, I have a pile of money over here. I want to give it to you to manage this property. If they are terrible, if they take 3 hours to get back to you, that's a really bad sign, because once you're their client, it's going to be 3 days or 3 weeks or maybe never. So responsiveness is a big deal. Their ability to answer intelligent questions around real estate investing, because the bar is relatively low for property management in general. Like, sometimes it's viewed as the redheaded stepchild of the real estate sales industry. Like, if you couldn't cut it buying and selling homes, well, go manage homes. Well, that's unfortunate, because it is although it requires sometimes the same licensure, it's a totally different business, totally different skill set. And the way I got into the business was, I got so frustrated dealing with property management companies that I said, okay, guys, I'm just going to do this on my own. I'll figure it out. And 10 years later, here we are. And there's way more to it, because you're trying to ensure you have a consistent service at scale with 1,000 different tasks that have to be done. And if a couple of those tasks are not done correctly, it snowballs into bigger and bigger problems. And that's where people struggle. Like, if you don't have the command and control of the company and an attention to detail and systems and processes in place, it's going to be a dumpster fire. And that's how a lot of the companies are. And a lot of the reputation of the industry is well deserved, because there are people out there doing it who probably shouldn't be. So.
No, those are excellent points. Again, one of the reasons why I love property managers for my clients is real estate investing is incredibly powerful. The government incentivizes you to invest in real estate, but you think about the headaches. No one wants to get that phone call that, hey, send over a plumber or something's wrong. We call these noisy investments. one of the things I love about property managers like yourself is you quiet that noise down, take that burden away. But any other tips that you would offer as we evaluate, or how does a property investor know that it's time to move on from their management company?
So if they're not responding, like if there's issues, and you can't get a hold of anybody, that's a sign. In fact, we've created content around exactly this. Like, what are the signs that you need to fire your management company? Multiple repeated mistakes on your statements that you get from them, like that, those statements should be flawless. Like you shouldn't be getting charged for things that didn't happen or double charged or things like that. And then the biggest one in my mind is if you in your gut know that you don't trust what they're telling you or what's coming across your desk, it's time, because it's very, very difficult to regain trust in the management company. Once they've lost it, cut your loss and move on.
That's a great point. Let's talk something that I see a trend in California is the accessory dwelling unit. That, hey, let's build something above the garage, or hey, I got a little piece of land on the side of the yard. What do you see there? California seems to be the hotbed for my clients doing this. It's kind of the rage. What is your take on ADUs, and do they create any special nuances that people should be aware of?
So love ADUs. We live in California. Your market is similar. Like it's really hard to buy a property and just rent it out and have the rent cover the mortgage and put a little extra in your pocket every month. Those days in our area are gone. So as a real estate investor, the holy grail of real estate investing is cash flow. Well, if cash flow has disappeared, which virtually it has, you need to come up with some other way to either generate more cash, so the investment makes sense to you. And ADUs is one of those ways. Now, I think why ADUs are so popular is there's a housing shortage. I think there's a housing shortage nationwide, but it's especially bad in California. Well, our politicians are drunk on let's create as much housing as we can. In some respects, I think some things they do good, like ADUs is a perfect example. They are promoting ADUs aggressively. Some things they do really bad, like making it 3 times as expensive to build a house in California as it is to build in Texas or some other state. So their answer is let's create more housing, more dense housing. And then a lot of the cities in California were like, not in my backyard, which is another big movement, right? Nobody wants this stuff in their backyard. So the state, as they love to do, started putting out new law, basically handcuffing all the municipalities, forcing them to take ADUs, which is where we're at currently. Now, from a real estate investing standpoint, ADUs are awesome because if you already own the house, there is no cost of acquisition of the property. You already have it. You're literally paying for the cost of construction. So, and construction's expensive, like just a regular 800 square foot ADU in our market, you could easily pay $300,000 or $400,000 to build that alone. However, you also can turn around and rent it out for, depending, there's a lot of factors that come in, but it's not uncommon to rent an ADU for $2,500 to $3,500 a month either. So there are a ton of benefits to them. They're pushing, the big push now is they just released a new set of laws at the first of the year on allowing multifamily houses to build more ADUs. So like you can take, let's say you have an eight unit apartment complex, assuming you have the land available,
right?
You put 8 ADUs. So you can match the number of units you have in ADUs, which is wild. Unfortunately, there's not always a lot of land that goes along with multifamily properties, but some do. I'm looking at a duplex that I'm anticipating turning it into a fourplex with this new law. So from a investor standpoint, you can really boost your returns and you can get closer to where you're actually going to cash flow with ADUs. In fact, one of the first ADU laws they passed was you can turn a house into a triplex you could build a unattached ADU and then you can convert existing space in the main house to an ADU, effectively building triplexes out of single family houses. Is good from an investor standpoint. Neighbors hate these things. The neighborhoods are the ones that are opposed to these because the density, the parking, it messes neighborhoods up in a lot of different ways. So
right. How about from a property management perspective? Do ADUs create any special headaches or any issues that a real estate investor should be aware of?
They can, yes. So our advice is like we need to segregate the house. Like we can't have a house, the ADU in the backyard with no fencing. So then we're like, well, whose backyard is this? And if there's pets involved, or kids. So you got to make sure that there's clearly well-defined space on what belongs to who. Depending on how you built the ADU in the city you're in, sometimes dictates whether or not they're on their own utilities or not. If they're not on their own utilities, you have to have systems in place for breaking up utilities, if there's not like separately metered things. So there are nuance to it. There is nuance to it, but it's nothing that a good management company has already figured out that can help you with it.
Right. Well, since you're in California, let me ask, do you think there's going to be any changes or impact to you in your industry after these California fires, the whole Palisades issue? Do you think that's going to have impact?
So literally we just released our podcast on the state of emergency price gouging issues around this. So the answer is yes, but I don't think long term, right? So we are in the county right next to Los Angeles. So some of that Palisades fire was like basically butting up against our county, kind of. The state of California declares an emergency in a situation like that, and that automatically enacts like an anti-price gouging law. So you can't raise the rents over 10%. There's a bunch of rules around it. It's not just for housing, it's for groceries and construction workers and any kind of consumable good. Because unfortunately, people do like to take advantage, and it's really a shame. I don't know why people just don't do the right thing, but they clearly don't. But there's people that are like, oh, the fire just happened. We lost 20,000 houses. I'm going to put my house on the market, and that's going to be for 4 times what it normally would go for. So that's what those laws are designed for. The downside of those laws is they usually leave them in place for extended periods of time, which is not a good thing in my opinion. But the short-term impact to our market is it further constricts the supply. It's already a constricted supply under normal circumstances. You overnight take away, I forget what the number is, at 16, 20,000 houses. It's
Right.
that much worse for everybody else. So short term, there's some pain involved. There's people, having to go out of the area or not having a place to live. Long term, I don't think it's a huge impact. I think the biggest impact to our long term affordability is the crazy regulation that California puts out, which I alluded to it. Like you can build a house in California for X, you build the same house in Texas for 2, 3, 4 times less, which doesn't make any sense. In fact, oh, never mind. All right, let's
Go ahead, finish that thought.
I
Yeah.
was going to say, like we use some out of country staff for some of the administrative work in our businesses, and we have a worker in South Africa who basically built a house. So she built her house on wages that obviously we pay here. And when I was talking to her, like, okay, now that it's all done, like, what did it cost? And then she showed us the house, like a little tour on video, and it was a nice house. It was like a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house, but it looked no different than a brand new house here. And when she told me that, she's like, well, including the land, because she bought the lot, in the equivalent of US dollars to their currency, it was $50,000. And that blew my mind away because it's the same, it's tile flooring, it's sinks, it's cabinets. The parts are basically the same, but that same house in California would have cost $700,000 to build. Like, wrap your mind around that, like how that makes sense and how a lot of these pricing is like just a figment of someone's imagination. All the people stepping on it and affecting the price. Like, it's wild. It was wild to me because she's in arguably a third world country, same building materials, same things. And so anyway.
No, and that's part of the problem of why we have a housing crisis. When it's so expensive to create and invest in real estate, it's going to create that shortage. But before we leave this topic of government regulation, a lot of my clients there in California groaned, especially when the recession and the housing bubble burst. All of a sudden, it was hard to get tenants out of property. So talk to us about that. What is that environment, and is that another advantage to you as a property manager when dealing with clients who aren't paying?
Yeah, so everyone has heard the horror stories. It took 2 years and they didn't pay rent the whole time, and they literally destroyed the house and they took it down to the studs and stole the copper and the appliances. I hear those stories all the time, and those are real stories. What you don't hear about those stories is 9 times out of 10, it's the owner of the property trying to do the eviction themselves. Because I mean, you're an attorney, as you know, all of this stuff is there's so much process, and the court needs it like your T's crossed a certain way, and this particular form filled out, in this particular timeline, and if you miss it here, you start all over. Those stories, one, they're totally unnecessary. Like if they just would hire an eviction attorney from the beginning, they wouldn't have all those problems, because guess what? The eviction attorney knows how the game is played. It's when a landlord goes, I'm gonna save the $2,000 on the eviction attorney and do this myself. They have zero idea how the game is played, and they just keep getting recycled. And that's how you end up 2 years down the road, and the whole time they're not paying rent. In our practice here, our business, we don't do evictions ourselves because we're not crazy, and we're not lawyers. Now, could we? I think we probably could. Would we mess it up? Probably. That's why we use an eviction attorney. But for what I tell our clients is 4 to 6 weeks. Assuming it's an uncomplicated, there's no like actual, problems like habitability issues that the landlord caused, or the tenant wants to get a jury trial or something, like those things take longer. But an uncomplicated, the tenant lost their job, stopped paying rent, 4 to 6 weeks. COVID was a different story. When we were in COVID, that was, all bets were off and they weren't doing evictions at all. But that's kind of normalized. 4 to 6 weeks, they're really not that big of a deal if you do them right. Where they get screwed up is when owners try to insert themselves. It would be like if I tried to micromanage your asset protection business and was telling you what to do when I'm not an attorney. I don't know anything about it, but since you're working with me, I'm going to tell you how to do it. That's where we see those kind of horror stories come from.
No, that's a great point. And that's the problem when people try to do it themselves. They end up not only doing it wrong, but it ends up costing them more if they would have just hired competent counsel. So I think we did a great job of talking today about how to mitigate disasters. Any tips do you have on how to maximize profits in real estate investing from a property management point of view?
Yeah, it goes back, same thing, treat it like a business, right? Make decisions based on accurate information. Don't, and this is specifically from a property management perspective, and this is where I think the real estate investing community and thought leaders kind of lead people astray, is this whole DIY thing really screws people over. Using unlicensed, uninsured vendors to do work is like a huge trap. Like, somebody does it wrong, insurance company denies because you didn't have it done correctly, that type of thing. But don't be cheap. Fix things right the first time, right? Like if you put band-aids on things, it almost always backfires. And the second, your tenant is your customer. They are paying you for a service. The service happens to be you give them somewhere to sleep at night. But if you don't respect that and you treat them poorly, guess what? They're not going to treat your property nicely. They're going to make your life difficult. So at our company, we say we treat our tenants like gold, because for two reasons. One, it's the right thing to do. We should treat people well. And two, it's in the best interest of our clients, because if we treat the tenants well, they stay longer, which is by far the best thing for the landlord. Turnover is very expensive, and they take care of the property. So those are mistakes I see people making, is being cheap, not treating the tenants well, not treating it like a business. Those are all things that will bite you in the end.
That's great. So before we wrap up today, anything else you feel like you want to share that you haven't had to before we sign off? Of course, we'll ask you about your podcast and more about your business, but any other tips and tricks or wisdom that you haven't had an opportunity to share yet?
Yeah, I would just say, like in regards to like asset protection, and probably what you're trying to educate your listeners on is, can you go overkill in asset protection if you have one rental property? I think you can. Yeah, you probably could put way too much in place.
Right.
But I always like to go back to, like, what is your goal? Like, what are you trying to, why are you investing in real estate? Like, what's the end game here? Is the end game you want to own 100 properties and live off the cash flow in the Bahamas and drink Mai Tais all day? That's fine. Then I would say do more work up front, get yourself set up as an actual business and maybe overinvest in certain areas like asset protection or, the structure of your business, versus if you just have one rental property because you inherited it from your parents, that's totally different. And then I would say, don't go crazy on asset protection, put some basic stuff in place and call it a day. But because there's the whole gamut of what you could do with real estate investing. You could literally have one property that you inherited, or you could have 2,000 apartment units and have a staff of 50 people running them. They're both real estate investors, two totally different businesses with totally different needs. So I would say just scale to what you're trying to do. I follow this guy, this social media guy who's big on asset protection, because as you know, I went down an asset protection rabbit hole trying to figure it all out and see what I was going to do. And he does it all himself, and it sounds like a disaster, but he's living a different lifestyle, and he literally he's a nomad basically, and he's done all this stuff. There's just different ways to do it. And I would say what I ended up doing is I felt most comfortable just going straight to an attorney, because there's plenty of non-attorneys who do asset protection, which seems a little risky to me, but right. I feel the best with someone who does this professionally, and that's all they do. But anyhow, not like I'm trying to plug your business or anything, but.
Well, as you know, Peter, we value you as a client and appreciate that you recognize what we provide to our clients is instrumental. I'll just piggyback, everyone. This is why we have guests on this podcast with different perspectives. Really appreciate yours, Peter, because in real estate investing is such a powerful tool. But unfortunately, I see time and time again that when you go cheap, I love how you said that, don't go cheap, because what we preach, and you've been through this as our client, Peter, we want to lay a foundation. And that foundation can be as simple or as complex as your investments. So one of the mistakes I do see is that people not only not using attorneys, but when they do use an attorney makes this myriadly really complicated plan, and they might only have 2 properties. And you're like, good grief, I'm filing now 5 tax returns. I have all these LLCs and everything going, and they're pulling their hair out. So you want to build a structure, everyone, that not only mitigates the risk, protects your assets from your personal lawsuits, but also from the accidents that happen on the property. But you want to do it in a manner that your plan will grow with you. And you, as a business owner, are keeping in mind, okay, it's time to strengthen my plan when I have more to lose. So, Peter, thank you so much for your time today. How can we find your podcast? And for those clients that may be interested in having a property manager like you manage their properties, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so we have a podcast. It's called The Accidental Landlord. It's literally designed to level real estate investors up, teach them how to be professional real estate investors and treat it like a business. So it's on all the platforms. It's called The Accidental Landlord. If you're interested in connecting with us, the name of my business is Rincon Property Management. You can look us up on everywhere, basically. But yeah, feel free to reach out. Happy to have a conversation.
Great. And that's Rincon, RINCON, Property Management, right?
Yep, RINCON. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, Peter, thank you so much. And listeners, I hope you found value in this. Again, I want you to obviously grow your wealth, but do it in a way that's going to protect it from your lawsuits and from creating lawsuits against you, so that we can create that generational wealth, not just for our kids, but for our grandkids and posterity. Thank you for being with us today. Take care.
You've been listening to the Asset Protection Show, expert strategies by attorney John Skabelund. For more information, go to assetprotectionshow.com.
This content is legal information only and not legal advice. Viewing this content does not create an attorney-client relationship. Mr. Skabelund is admitted to practice law in Arizona, and he may be reached at ultimateassetprotection.com.